for the last 15 years, where he has served as an aide in the Ohio Senate, an associate with an independent lobbying firm representing corporate interests, trade associations, and nonprofit entities in Ohio and Washington, D.C., as well as in leadership positions in state executive agencies. So I understand he has some of his staff here as well. I'll let Tim introduce them. But Patrick, welcome.
No, thank you, Andy. I appreciate it, and it's great to be here with you all. Holly, can you hear me okay? Or Andy, just make sure as I kick off?
Yep.
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, thank you for this opportunity to catch up with you all. I know at one point we were planning to do it in person in March, and for obvious reasons that's not the case, but it's exciting to be here with you all now virtually and to be able to share the Drive Ohio story and the work we're doing and some of the recognition we're getting for that work and exciting pieces around that. So looking forward to kind of talking with you all today, hearing some background on these different efforts around the state and different partners that we're working with that really, I think, highlight the great assets within this state for this smart mobility technology conversation that we'll lean into. I am excited to have a couple of my colleagues on the phone with me. I think one of the really special things about this Drive Ohio effort is some of the expertise and talent that has been pulled together for this team as we work on these efforts. So I'm joined by Nick Hagemeyer, our Managing Director for Infrastructure. Some of you all, I'm hopeful, are familiar with Nick just from the Central Ohio area and a lot of the work we're doing in this space. I'm also joined by Rich Granger, our Managing Director for Workforce Development. Some really exciting initiatives Rich will talk about from the perspective of we're doing both in the education front as well as the broader talent conversation in this space. And then also Luke Stetke, our Managing Director of Communications, but also doing the policy and regulatory work for Drive Ohio, which is a big space, as you can guess. So really to kick off, thank you, Andy, for that introduction. So Drive Ohio has been around for just over 2 years, formally set up through an executive order under the previous administration. We're really excited to have that continued on under the Dwayne Husted administration, and frankly, I think elevated and some exciting work going on that front. Yeah, Holly, if you don't mind going to the next one, next slide there. So it was a good day. It was exciting to be with Governor DeWine this past October at OTEC when he signed kind of the reauthorized executive order for Drive Ohio, recognizing some of the work we've been doing and progress we've been making. But also, I think it also notated the Fly Ohio initiative and the UAS work. So as you can see here in our mission statement, it really is that advancement of self-driving vehicle technology on the ground and in the air. And then it's our key pillars: safety, mobility, access, reliability, and talent. You could guess those are big pillars for us. So both the vehicle side, but then you could guess the infrastructure side. So I talk about these technology focus areas for us, and as you can see, they're highlighted there from the vehicle technology, but also the infrastructure on the ground and in the air. A big part of the work we're doing, and I think Lori's on some exciting work we've been doing along the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor. That infrastructure for connected vehicle capabilities is really something special, and setting up, I believe, an ecosystem, that will be unparalleled in its full expanse as we build that out throughout the year. And capabilities, but then also the air side of the infrastructure, some exciting work going along 33 as well, but also down in the Springfield Airport from that perspective. And in the air, the infrastructure is that lower altitude air traffic control piece. So you fly those drones and otherwise beyond that visual line of sight. So we'll be talking more about that. But as you can see, the pillars I kind of mentioned: safety, mobility, access, reliability, and talent. A lot baked in that, but I think it starts to frame up why we're doing this and what the opportunity here is. And it does all start with safety. Certainly under the DeWine administration, that safety, transportation safety is an absolute key pillar in this. And you've heard a lot of conversation about that. For us, the conversation around, the over 300,000 accidents that happen in the state a year, 1,100 of those fatals. And the belief is this technology can turn the dial on that. We can start to make an impact. Even beyond the physical infrastructure work that we've been able to do with barriers and other things in the past. It's now getting to the vehicles and doing things with these connected vehicle capabilities. You'll see some examples of that as we go through the presentation that we believe can really make an impact. It's that ability for using infrastructure to frankly see around a corner, so that as you're turning a corner, you can get a warning if a pedestrian's coming across that. Those are huge opportunities and have the ability to do, I think, a lot to kind of again, turn that dial on the safety piece. And then mobility and access, and certainly in these times specifically, you could guess some of these potential technology capabilities and how they factor into mobility and access issues for folks that maybe haven't traditionally had access to great mobility uses, but also some of the different ways the technology can enhance those first last mile type capabilities, but also provide information. It's interesting. I think we've really tried to approach this in Ohio from a thoughtful and strategic approach, and build upon these even different levels of autonomy, but also different capabilities and information data. This is a large data conversation as well that can come from both the vehicles, the infrastructure, and then be utilized to manage traffic, but also to kind of prevent things, potentially, hopefully prevent some accidents from ever happening. I think one of the special things you're starting to see built into vehicles is the different ADAS systems, automated driving assist systems, that are being built into them. And maybe many of you have vehicles now that have some of these capabilities where, it's the brake, automatic brake assist, the lane keep, things like that are utilizing the technology. And then for us, and frankly, being housed in the Ohio Department of Transportation, it's how that infrastructure interacts with that. So we spend a lot of time in the Drive Ohio space looking at what automation ready can look like, striping and just roadway conditions and data and information from the infrastructure from roadside units all go into it. Holly, if you mind jump to the next piece. I had mentioned reliability and talent as weather, and I don't mean to skip over them. We'll be coming back to them later in the presentation from some of the different colleagues. Reliability is one of our words for congestion, and it's that reliable ability to know when you leave somewhere how long it's going to take you to get there. And I think there's some capabilities between data and otherwise to do that. And talent, a huge part of this conversation. Ultimately, with technology, there's certainly a disruption factor, and I think we're excited for what some of those disruptions can be and some of the capabilities that can be and some of the outputs and pathways that come from it. So what you're looking at now, I like to show this because I think it gives you a real good glimpse of the structure of Drive Ohio. And many and all of you I know are very familiar with the Ohio Department of Transportation. Couldn't be more excited. We're housed within the Ohio Department of Transportation. And as you can see, formally through the executive order, have liaisons in 13 different agencies, all with the idea, this concept being that one-stop shop for companies looking to research, test, and deploy automated and connected vehicle technology in the state, and the ability to react quickly to opportunities when they come up, but also to be able to navigate that physical infrastructure space, but also the regulatory infrastructure. That's where, as Luke will talk later, and then you'll hear, we're excited to be working from that perspective to continue to evaluate our current regulatory infrastructure, and then as things come up, as entities and opportunities, explore things, and as we push the envelope on what's possible, it invokes a whole series of conversations, as you can guess. And then we do have those, you can see around the periphery there, the different working groups. And I think they highlight for you the different pressure points, but also conversations, thought leadership conversations that have come up as we've been in this smart mobility space along this. And each of those, you could guess, has a different bend to it. But what I think really what's been fortunate is all of you as industry partners, as well as academic and local government and otherwise partners that are participating in these different conversations. It really is a special thing to help inform this conversation. If you don't hear the word safety from me enough, I've not done my job. And the other word that you'll hear me say a lot is collaboration. I think that is the special sauce here for Ohio in this space is the ability to leverage all of these different, frankly, assets that are located within the state and the proximity of those assets together to enhance the value add to both industry partners as well as just our internal state apparatus, both local government as well as state government, and then frankly partnerships and interactions with the federal government in this space. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Drive Ohio Advisory Board. Really an exciting piece for us to have that industry set of expertise to be a part of helping inform and frankly make sure our eyes are wide open to industry trends, capabilities, but also things that we need to avoid potentially. So really fortunate to have Brett Rubinek, the president and CEO of the Transportation Research Center, be the chair of that Drive Ohio Advisory Board, and currently working with the administration to fully populate that board with appointees. So more to come on that, but excited to share that piece. And as I said, I really do think it is a special set of capabilities with those liaisons in those different agencies. There have been countless times where we've been able to kind of collaborate with those different contacts to navigate through something, and to be able to be nimble enough to fully capitalize on the innovative pieces that are happening in this space, and not be caught flat-footed, but also be able to kind of respond to that. Holly, you mind going to the next one? So for me, this is really this map here. There's a lot on there, and believe me, we know that. My team knows that. But it's exciting to all these different capabilities, both from corridor projects to city partnerships, to just broader efforts that this involves. And one of the things I like to highlight here and talk about, and in my belief, one of the coolest things that has come out of this is what we call the Drive Ohio Alliance. And it was really exciting for the executive order, Governor DeWine signed, to see that fully recognized within that. And I think for many of you, a lot of you participants in that, and have had the chance to come to some of the Drive Ohio Alliance meetings, it is grown to over 200 different individuals representing a whole variety of industry, major academic partners, and as I said, different levels of government participate in that, all the way from FHWA to different local government, cities, transit associations, and otherwise, all coming together. We try to meet quarterly. We had planned a meeting down in Cincinnati in early March. Obviously, you could guess we have postponed that, and we're trying to explore, just like you all are doing, what a virtual Drive Ohio Alliance meeting could look like sometime later this summer. So stay tuned for that. But it's an opportunity for us to come together quarterly and share updates on projects we're doing, but I think even more importantly, to be able to share best practices and just network around this space. Because one thing we're not trying to do is to do things in a vacuum. I think the really special thing about this Drive Ohio project, this effort, is the statewide effort that it is. It is not meant to be just one thing done in one space. It is truly, as you can see just from this map, and we'll be going into details in some of these projects, it is meant to pilot things in certain places, learn those capabilities, learn what we don't know, and pressure test and push some things, and then and do those things in different places and different environments and whatnot around the state, and then bring that back and be able to kind of leverage that as we go forward. You heard me reference earlier that I believe really truly thoughtful, strategic approach that we've tried to take to this. Reality is we are not California and or even Florida and Texas, where the weather is kind of nicer almost throughout the entire year. We have all these different seasons, and all of those different seasons lead to different challenges for the technologies and capabilities. But I think that's where we get to the special piece of that broader Drive Ohio Alliance concept I referred to. Where all these different capabilities and partners throughout the state, we can leverage all that expertise together. And we're doing that both in the Drive Ohio space as well as the Fly Ohio and the UAS space. And I think it really tells a heck of a story. It's a differentiator for us in Ohio. I mean, again, we're not Detroit with specifically some of those assets and work there, but what we are is a series of capabilities and collaborators that I think you can get a lot in one very confined space. And the other piece I'd point out, you see the dots of the city use cases. I think it has been one of the most exciting things I've had the chance to do with Drive Ohio is really have traveled the state and meet with the mayors of all those major cities and some even different smaller sized cities in all different parts of the state, and have those conversations about transportation related problems and just challenges that they see, and how this technology can be involved in potentially solving or just better understanding some of those challenges. So that's what a lot of those represent, all in different places as far as status. Some we've pursued some USDOT grants with, some we've been able to pursue specific industry partnerships with, some just continuing to vet out what's possible and where the interest or the activity could lie. And I think again, capitalizes for me is just the momentum in this space and the possibilities. And that's really what we're trying to leverage as we go through this next step. Holly, can I go to the next one? That's where I'm going to turn it over to Luke Stedke on my team to talk a little bit about some of the specific projects that we've done. Some of you may be familiar with this one, but Luke, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Can everybody hear me? All right. So yeah, before I go into a deep dive into the projects, when we have conversations, not only with companies but organizations across the state of Ohio and the United States, the one thing we always hear back almost unanimously is a lot of companies are surprised that an innovative organization such as Drive Ohio is housed within a Department of Transportation. So when Patrick talks about differentiators and collaboration, it really is part of that secret sauce that makes these deployments possible, and it makes our job a lot easier. The wider and the bigger the table we have with these conversations. So the first autonomous shuttle in the state of Ohio was the Smart Circuit. It was kicked off in December of 2018 through the summer of 2019. We actually, after the shuttle was done with its service contract, we took a lot of the signage and donated a small, 6-piece exhibit to the Ohio History Connection as the first autonomous shuttle in the state of Ohio. So a lot of lessons learned. One of the things that I think sometimes I forget when we're working through a project such as this is that the process itself is part of the learning. We currently in the state of Ohio don't have code language that is used in these deployments. We rely upon 2 executive orders that Patrick had mentioned previous. And working these systems, we want to make sure before we open the code, we know where the pain points are and where we need to focus that language on. So the ability to work with local communities, companies, and others to kind of see what everybody needs to get out of a project has been invaluable. And that was the Smart Circuit was the first one of that nature. Holly, you can move to the next slide. The second deployment was the Linden Leap. That is currently not running. There was an incident in February where there was an unplanned stop. So they are working through that process. Also, one of the things that we have to look at during this current crisis is social distancing and the parameters around not only transit in general, but this one specific to the size of the shuttle. So a very interesting deployment that was in the Linden area of Ohio. The second deployment in reference to the Smart Columbus, the Smart Cities grant that they were awarded in 2016. So there's no scheduled service as of yet to go back on the road, but I think we should be hearing more in the next couple of weeks. So Holly, you can go to the next slide. And then the next deployment of an autonomous shuttle will be part of the Youngstown Smart 2 project. They won a US DOT build grant, the Eastgate, which is a council of governments out of Northeast Ohio, and you can see the partners there. The really interesting thing about this project is that the shuttle itself will be operated by the Western Reserve Transit Association, so it's really a collaboration between Council of Governments, University, local partners, and then transit organizations to kind of make this, to see what and where this service could be valuable, focused on the downtown connecting the university, the business district, and Mercy Health. So that will be interesting over the next 2 years as well. Holly, you can go to the next slide. And this is really our flagship project, the US 33 Smart Mobility Corridor that goes back to 2016, where fiber optic cable was put in the roadway. And as you can see, it starts, we talk about collaboration. It really is, it's a word we use a lot, but it's something that we could not do our job without. So kind of capitalize on that Smart Columbus win. You've got the cities of Dublin, Marysville, and then also the Transportation Research Center. The one thing we in Ohio are very blessed to have is unparalleled assets when it comes to research and development. If it's not TRC on the ground side, it's AFRL and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base on the air. So it really is, when Patrick was talking about that ecosystem, that full system deployment and development can really happen right here in the state of Ohio. So as you travel east and west on 33 between Dublin and TRC, you'll be able to see some of the poles going up, the roadside units going up, and we look forward to a completion of that project at the end of July. So more news to come on that as well. You can go to the next one. So as part of that project, we'll try to, I don't know if we can try, this is can we try to play that slide, Holly, or if not?
It doesn't look like it's playing.
That's okay. We can move on. That was just going to highlight one of the smart intersections that the city of Marysville and Honda have deployed, and just a little bit more in-depth discussion of how that system works. So, like Patrick said, the majority, well, the sole focus of our projects are moving the needle on those safety numbers. So, TRC, of course, like I said, an unparalleled asset in the state of Ohio and the United States. Last July, they just opened up their new Smart Center, and that's 540 acres of dedicated space and technology for automated and connected vehicles. And if you've been watching the news lately, a lot of activity over there specific to trucking as well. So a great partner and a great asset for the state of Ohio. You can go to the next one. This is the smart intersection. You can see the ability for these signals and these lanes to be reconfigured is really amazing. When they opened it last July, I don't know if anybody was there at that event. They did a mock test and had 5 vehicles going in 4 different directions. So the facility itself is quite impressive. You can go to the next one as well. So we talk about automated and connected. One of those connected projects would be the I-9 to Lake Effect corridor. So spring of 2019, phase 1 was completed. You know, the Lake Effect snow is really, if you lived north of Columbus, Ohio, in northern Ohio, it really is dangerous, and the snow can appear quite quickly. So the adjustable speed limits were put in place in that 60-mile stretch, with the ability within 5 minutes of a weather event coming up to change those and really cut down. What we're trying to mitigate is the large pileups over those roadways, and have moved in substantially impacted a decrease in those pileup events. You can go to the next one as well. Turnpike is, we talked about TRC, that the Ohio Turnpike is another 241 miles of straight, flat roadway. Is a really impressive asset as well. They, on a 60-mile stretch of that, they put on roadside units, and we talked about data, and we talked about these systems and the process. Part of the learning is understanding how we get this data from these locations, from these vehicles, into a single, I hate to say data link, but ecosystem data feed. And they've done that effectively with roadside units, onboard units on their snow fleet. So collecting that information to kind of see where, when it plows up, when it plows down, what is the speed, the variation of the roadway in relation to different times of the year. So that's a capability that they will be building out as the technology matures. And then the 670 Smart Lane. We talk about smart mobility technologies. It's more than just automated and connected vehicles. It's the ability to use technology to make, again, our roadways safer. And this was brought on last fall, and it's a dedicated hard shoulder from downtown through the airport eastbound, where we can adjust the number of lanes and also the speed of those lanes. And prior to, the travel numbers changing during the COVID crisis, I don't know if anybody utilized it, but I actually live in Westerville, and I changed my travel from downtown because of the time I was saving. I was saving 10 to 15 minutes utilizing that 670 stretch, where usually I just try to avoid it just because of the sheer, backup of it. So you can go to the next slide, Holly. And this is just, So we want to see when it's open and closed. So next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Rich Granger, who does workforce work for Drive Ohio, and he's going to talk about ADS.
Thank you, Luke. Good morning, everybody. Greetings from my daughter's bedroom, hence the ink wall and the beautiful artwork. I'm going to be talking about our smart mobility strategy with focus on two particular areas, rural deployments and smart logistics. So when we talk about how we're different in Ohio from other areas, you know, it's just like any business or any other economic development strategy. We want to talk about what makes our state unique, not only the collaboration, but also the assets we have and the geographies and the climates and everything that makes Ohio stand out in the Midwest and in the US for smart mobility. So one of those areas that we've really focused on is rural applications of smart mobility. And what you see on the screen here are some details on a particular funding award that Ohio was selected for. We were very excited and proud about this. So the US Department of Transportation had a grant program called Automated Driving Systems. There was a nationwide competition. Ohio was one of 8 recipients, so we're very excited about that. A whole bunch of partners that we'll describe in a minute here focused on rural deployments of automated driving systems to support US DOT on rulemaking and policy making. And so there's some very specific focus areas for this 4-year program. You can see the funding, the federal grant supplemented with a lot of partner matches. So an almost $18 million investment focused in Southeast Ohio, with a significant amount of the work being done at Transportation Research Center, TRC, up in East Liberty, to kind of get everything prepared, and then working to deploy this technology in other parts of the state. If we could go to the next slide, you'll get a quick look at some of the team members. You got to love those pictures of the gigantic checks. We didn't get the whole $60 million shown on that check. We got a portion of it, but that's Secretary Chow from USDOT and the Ohio delegation at the announcement of the award not too long ago. So we've since kicked off the program, and things are starting to move forward on this project. The next slide kind of gives you an infographic with more information about the program, where we're deployed, some of the key partners, and some of the use cases. So what we're talking about are 2 major use cases on this project. One is vehicle deployment for improving mobility and access in rural settings, with a particular focus on improved access to healthcare and food. We have some partners from, for example, the Ohio University Diabetes Institute. We've got some local grocery providers signing letters of support. And what we're talking about is how might these automated driving systems eventually be used to deliver food, healthcare supplies, moving people between appointments, things of that sort. Now, we're not going to stand up an actual passenger service during this project, but we're back to that theme of infrastructure. We're laying the groundwork for those types of systems to be deployed. You know, we believe that this is a chance to make sure that all communities are brought into this conversation, including rural communities. That's very important to us. Some of the work along the US 33 corridor has a similar focus to it with the work in and around Marysville. And so in this case, we're looking at Southeast Ohio. How can this benefit? And so what do these passenger vehicles have to be able to do in these rural settings where there's more hills, there's dense foliage, there's interruptions in cellular communication, there's interruptions in GPS service? How do they work? How resilient are they? Where are the hot spots? What are some boosts to the infrastructure that might be needed? Those are all questions that we'll start to both uncover and start to answer during this 4-year program. The other piece of the program is focused on movement of goods. You see a picture of some trucks there. You've got some details sprinkled into that infographic. And if on this and all of our programs, by the way, you can visit our website, of course, and find other information and details. But what you see here is deployment of truck platooning on both interstate and some local and state roads to see how this technology works for the movement of goods in rural settings as well. And we've got a lot of industry partners to go with this program. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some more details on the partners. Some are right in the middle of the program activities. Others have signed letters of support, and everyone has agreed that this is a priority for our state. And we're really just getting started on this program. So we'll continue to provide updates over the next 4 years as we march our way through the first year of planning, and then in years 2 through 4, vehicle deployments with sort of 6-month sprints. And the idea is making this a catalyst for deployment of deployment of automated driving systems in a rural setting. And ideally, what we will end up seeing is a whole flurry of activity of this sort, not just under this program umbrella, but a series of related initiatives is the objective. We're talking with partners in other states, including Pennsylvania through the Smart Belt Coalition, talking with partners at Carnegie Mellon about this type of activity to see how do we increase the deployment of automated driving systems in the Appalachian region in general, and understand what are the use cases and the challenges associated with it. So that's an example of our rural portfolio. If you could please go to the next slide, we'll kind of shift into smart logistics a little bit. So when we say that, we're talking about the movement of goods. You look at ODOT's mission, it's the safe and effective movement of people and goods. We talked a little bit earlier about people movers and automated vehicles. When you talk about the movement of goods, it's a whole different conversation, and the technologies are interconnected. So it's all coming from a lot of the same pool of technologies and companies and talent, but it's different use cases when you're talking about automation for trucking. We're even getting into discussions about yard automation. So we're seeing a lot of different pieces of the logistics puzzle that are implementing automation, sometimes at the same pace as passenger vehicles, sometimes at a faster pace. And our job is to line up the state's economy with where the technology is headed. And you look at logistics, and it is a major driver of the state's economy. So it only makes sense to have Drive Ohio be right in the middle of the conversation when it comes to automation and logistics. Here's one program example. This was a broad agency announcement through the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Highways, focused on truck platooning. There was some early planning work done in this program. So Drive Ohio helped to through our alliance model, pull together several stakeholders, whether it was from Department of Public Safety, State Highway Patrol, the Ohio Trucking Association, many of the relationships that we maintain. We were able to help convene those conversations in partnership with some industry partners and talk about what are the practical implications of truck platooning from a safety perspective, technology, regulations, policy, concept of operations. So that whole exercise was a good way to get everybody on the same page around those topics. They're continuing to explore future deployment opportunities coming out of that particular project. If you go to the next slide, we'll see some other examples. And so, in addition to the concepts of automation, we're talking about electrification at the same time. Here are a few examples of U.S. Department of Energy grant funding that ties into these themes of both logistics and passenger vehicle deployments. One of these has more of a rural flavor, also in Southeast Ohio, and then this other example focused on market solutions for electrified mobility. So you hear this a lot, and we understand and appreciate the importance of electrification as it relates to automated and connected vehicles and infrastructure on the ground and in the air. So we're really looking at sort of the complete portfolio when we talk about this. The next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about this smart logistics portfolio, building on some of the soon-to-be performed work on automated driving systems, some of the prior foundational work with truck platooning. We're looking at new opportunities, both with federal funding and with state pooled funding, to build out this smart logistics footprint all across the state. In this case, you're looking at a concept along Interstate 70 that could then expand to the other interstates that focuses on building out a truck automation corridor. Some of the logos shown here are just an example of some of the partners that we've had these discussions with. Some of the other partners that we have been or will be having these discussions with are quite honestly on this call right now. And other startup companies that we just haven't had a chance to stitch their logos in here yet. So a lot of very vibrant discussions about what does the future of smart logistics and truck automation look like? And you can see here, we're pulling together that same alliance collaboration model of government, industry, both from the technology side and the fleet deployment side. And these logistics councils are a great example of local chambers leaning into the discussion and helping us to identify those early adopters of this type of technology. So really focus on that collaboration model is kind of the way that we're getting all this type of work done in and around the state. And if we go to the next slide, I think this is my chance to hand it over to Nick Hagemeyer, our Managing Director of Infrastructure, to talk about some other projects and case studies.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Everybody can hear me, I'm assuming. We're going to go into talk a little bit about what we're trying to do with the AV Pooled Fund group. And the solicitation's been out there for a while. It comes down, or I guess the project will start in July of this year. What we're really trying to get out of this is, we've heard a lot today about automated vehicles and trucking and things of that nature with shuttles, and the big bonus that we see, or I guess the advantages that we see, are going to be taken first by the trucking industry. So up at the top left of this slide, you can see the concept of a freight automation corridor encompassing I-70 and I-75. We're really focusing in on, the lessons learned out of that AV Pooled Fund. How can we get the partners in the states that are along those routes to adopt some of that information, that information and that study and the guidance out of the AV Pooled Fund, so that we can have AV ready interstates? And then how do we transition those lessons learned into other corridors, such as the I-95 on the East Coast, or I-5 on the West Coast, or I-10 on the southern half of the state? And that also transitions to like I-94 and I-90. We really want to provide lessons learned to all of those different corridors, and then allow the country to really grow with this concept of freight automation and automation in general as a overall. Focusing on the interstates at first, and then focusing on what it looks like when you get off the interstates for those first last mile deliveries. Just go to the next slide, please. And so as we talked about all these different projects, we really wanted to figure out a way that we could tie all these projects together in Ohio, and we needed a way that we could maintain interoperability. I hear it a lot from other different states as we meet for the Connected Vehicle Pooled Fund. We'll have somebody coming in from another state, and they'll drive the distance crossing multiple state boundaries, and they'll see all the RSUs out in the field, the DSRC devices, and they'll have the OBUs in their vehicles, but they're not able to take advantage of any of the messaging coming off of those RSUs because they're deployed in a different manner than their state was deployed. So we really set up a framework here in Ohio for how those channels will be utilized. What are the security IDs, the PSIDs, the SSPs, and how will those be utilized across the state, so that we can maintain that interoperability. And if you go to the next slide, we can talk about a little bit of what this framework encompasses. So first, we have our CV-AV architecture. So who are the stakeholders, and how will they communicate across multiple different applications? What are the concepts of operations? So we had multiple different stakeholder engagement meetings and workshops to really understand what the needs of the different regions of the state are, and what applications we should focus on first. We didn't cover every application in the framework, realizing that this is a living document, and as different deployments come along, they're going to have their own concept of operations and their own needs and goals that we'll be able to slide into this framework to really provide a guide for future deployments, and continuing to update that as a more useful catalog of ways to deploy different technologies to solve for different use cases. The communications master plan. So we really looked at what the state has to offer right now as far as communications medium, where the fiber is located, where the devices are at for ITS, and where we already have infrastructure to be able to deploy the RSU and the connected vehicle technology. And then we also took a look at, what the different applications requirements or communication requirements are going to be. So if you deploy a application that requires no network, it's all standalone, versus a set of applications that may require fiber or wireless. So what those are, and to kind of help the future deployers understand what kind of communication medium they need to have in place to be successful in their deployments. And then the P3 approach and the program plan did just that. They really set up, what kind of funding and opportunities we should be looking at, as well as a program plan kind of outlining, what the direction should be for the next few years in the areas of CV and AV. You can look there in the bottom orange there. There's some system requirements and all those different requirements and high-level system design documents, as far as standard construction drawings, how the devices should be mounted on poles and stuff like that. That's all going to be included in the plan, in the framework, and the goal is to have all the deployments within Ohio follow those same requirements, so we do get that interoperability of the system, like I talked about earlier. And then if there are necessary changes, to have those deployments bring those up, and we can take a look at those down the road and make sure that we are staying up with the times and we are incorporating any of those changes that need to be made. Next slide. So I mentioned that we had the stakeholder engagement, and these are the top challenges that we were addressed in that stakeholder, or I guess they were identified. You can see there a lot of the different regions have congestion caused by roadway construction as one of their top challenges, and then congestion arterial roadways we're seeing show up in 4 of those areas. By identifying these top challenges, it really gave us an idea of what are the top 4 or 5 concept of operation scenarios that we should focus on during our creation of that ConOps. We realized we couldn't focus on everything, so we tried to prioritize based off of what the highest priorities were across the state. Next slide, please. And then, as you see, a lot of the autonomous vehicles are gaining traction across the nation and across the world. And we really wanted to make sure that we get the idea out there that the AV Pooled Fund is there to help promote and make a lot of these demonstrations a lot more capable, and trying to improve our infrastructure to support all the testing that's going on. And here I will turn it back over to Rich.
All right, thank you, Nick. So a lot of this prior discussion has been about the technology and about the economic development activities associated with deployment of the technology. And the vision here is, as this technology continues to spread and be adopted, it will have impacts. It is already having some impacts on our workforce. And so any good workforce development program has to be paired up with economic development, so you're covering both the supply side in terms of where the jobs are coming from, the supply side where the workers are coming from, and the demand side where the pull for those workers for job creation. So we're focused on integrating those two pieces. And so when you talk about workforce in the state of Ohio, it's a major priority for the DeWine Husted administration. You can see here, we hosted a listening session with partners from a national organization called PTIO, a Partnership for Transportation, Innovation, and Opportunity, with backing from several large automakers and the American Trucking Association and others, having a national conversation about workforce impacts of this automation technology. And then, as you can see here, Lieutenant Governor Husted, who's also the director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, helped us kick off that panel session, which was a very dynamic discussion about the challenges and opportunities. We had panelists from across the Drive Ohio Alliance talking about this. And so what do we mean when we say workforce development? If we go to the next slide, our version of workforce development for smart mobility talks about that technology trade space we mentioned earlier, connected, automated, and now increasingly electric vehicles and infrastructure on the ground and in the air. And we talk about it from pre-K to PhD. And we're talking about emerging workers in that younger pre-K to 12 group. We talk about the career tech and higher education students who are taking on their first few internships and transitioning into the workforce on a full-time basis. And then we talk about upskilling for the incumbent workers who have some current or soon upcoming needs to transition. I think a great example of the upskilling that we'll talk about is with auto technicians. We'll give an example on that. So you can see here, just at least across the state government perspective, several partners, but that same alliance model of collaboration applies here. We've got partners across industry, education, government, and communities working in close coordination on all these workforce programs throughout the portfolio. The next slide, we'll start to walk through a few quick examples. In that pre-K to 12 space, a great partnership with the Ohio STEM Learning Network over the past school year. For as strange as the ending has been for this school year, we still made a lot of great progress building relationships with K-12 partners all around the state through the annual OSLN's Design Challenge. This year's theme was Smart Mobility. And so we have these resources remain out there on their website for educators and parents to access to have a conversation with our emerging workers about smart mobility. We've engaged with students in Chillicothe, Lancaster, up in Mansfield, and all around the state. We've been to Toledo and parts of Northeast Ohio, all corners of the state, working with students who are coming up with some real great solution concepts on this challenge. So in spite of the remote learning challenges this year, we saw a lot of great work done under this.
Might have lost Rich. Looks like his screen froze. I tell you what, I'll take it from here until he comes back. Just another example of one of the city partnership projects that we mentioned. An ongoing conversation. Team McCog, the local MPO up there, pulled together a pretty cool coalition of folks like an autonomous vehicle steering committee concept, and it pulled together, as you can see, a whole portfolio of partners to explore this concept. And we've had a few concepts, ongoing discussions, one around a smart parking concept. I think it's a pretty neat nature. They've got some parking garages around the peripheral of the city, and we're exploring ways to potentially utilize some smart parking applications to identify getting both workers there to those garages, and then some kind of an on-demand or shuttle type service using an automated shuttle to the employers. One of the issues that was identified was a lot of the employees at some of the restaurants, in other words, were parking right around the restaurants, and then it caused them just parking issues for patrons of that. So just exploring different ways for that, as well as the potential sporting events and others when they were going on to utilize some of those assets and potential technology pieces. Go ahead to the next slide. And I think Rich was going to just hit on here is just this is a workforce piece. As you can guess, all these vehicles, as the technologies that are currently being integrated and continue to be integrated, all these sensors and things like that, it leads to a whole nother set of skill sets for repairs of these things. And we've had a really cool and ongoing conversation with AAA from a few perspectives in some of the different regional hubs about that workforce piece and some programming that they're looking to set up for upskilling and otherwise around some of these technologies. Go ahead, next slide. And I think another one, a really neat conversation that's been happening with the Dayton community, both the transit group, the city, as well as University of Dayton, and some students doing a capstone project, specifically looking at potentially what an automated shuttle or use case could look like there, as you can see down in the map, the river piece, and connecting some different areas. I think it was really neat to see the students from University of Dayton and a capstone project specifically participating that with the different partners and exploring that conversation as it goes forward. Go ahead, next slide. And I'm going to have Luke jump in here and talk a little UAS. As you could guess, and before Luke jumps in, we could do an entire hour presentation easily, and I appreciate everybody. I hope this has been beneficial on the UAS stuff. This opportunity and the assets in Ohio in this space are unparalleled. I know we use that word a lot, but we truly do believe it as you look at some of the different pieces around the state, from the Air Force Research Lab and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to NASA Glenn, even the Transportation Research Center and capabilities there. There's a great confluence of capabilities there that is pretty special, I think. And one of the things that I'll have Luke talk about here is SkyVision and the work they were able to kick off last April with the governor and others. Go ahead, Luke.
Thanks, Patrick. No, as Patrick outlined, the capabilities are unparalleled in the state of Ohio. You can see the SkyVision bus in the background, the governor up there talking. So last April at Springfield Beckley Airport, SkyVision was unveiled. And what SkyVision is a ground-based detect and avoid system. So what we are wanting to do is, when we think about the 0 to 2,000 feet airspace, the ability to unlock that for business activity is going to be critical, and there's a huge opportunity there. So what SkyVision does is, over a 200 square mile area, utilizing 3 towers, is it can allow for beyond visual line of sight flight. Currently, FAA mandates that a drone or a UAV needs to have some type of visual line of sight with it to fly safely. So what SkyVision allows is for these companies to test their capabilities through this system. You can go to the next slide, Holly. And this is just kind of, the air revolution. We talk about on the ground and in the air, and there truly is groundbreaking, paradigm-shifting technologies that are being developed. As these technologies mature, both on the ground and in the air, we kind of see, whether it's through the focus on EVs or the focus on automation, these technologies converging. And I think you'll see that with our next slide. So again, you can see the SkyVision area there, and then you can also see some of these deployments, specifically the UTM project that our UAS group, Fly Ohio Initiative, is doing in collaboration with the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor. Again, it's this corridor-based development of these transportation systems. Again, trying to figure out what needs to happen, where it needs to happen, and what's the safest way for these activities to come online. Holly, you can go to the next slide. Goes a little bit. Yeah, the skies are crowded, and we can see this. That's, especially the 0 to 500 feet. You look at what Amazon is doing in Africa and Australia. It's the gold rush, so to speak, is that 0 to 2,000. How we work with the FAA to test out these systems in a safe manner, while also being aware of what commercial airspace has been traditionally used for. So you can go to the next slide, Holly. This is a little bit more of a breakdown of what that corridor-based traffic would look like on the ground and in the air. And I want to make sure we have time for some questions. I think that may be our last slide. If not, I think there might be one more. And that's it. So yeah, I'll leave it back to Andrew and Holly for final questions. Thanks for the time.
Holly, sorry about that. We didn't mean to filibuster. I know we're at the hour, so I don't know what capabilities your folks. I mean, one thing you guys do see on that last slide, there's some contact information, and there's a way through the website. But certainly, Holly and Andy have my contact information. So if we don't get to it today, please don't hesitate to reach out. We live, as you can tell, hopefully, we love talking about this, and we're excited about this work and the possibilities. And it really can't happen without folks like yourselves that are out there in the industry in this space, both from the partnership perspective, but also just the awareness perspective and the capabilities. So I don't know if there's time. If not, I'll follow your lead, Holly.
Yeah, Patrick, thank you. I thank you and your team. Great job. I guess we do have some time. If anybody has any questions, if you can unmute yourself. If not, I have a question or two. Okay, hey, Patrick, are there, I wonder if you see any opportunities for smart mobility technology as we move through the current crisis, the coronavirus crisis?
It's been interesting to see. One of the things we try to do is really follow different industry trends and also what's seen out there. I saw down in Florida, they took they're utilizing one of the autonomous vehicle shuttle down there from the Mayo Clinic, moving tests from one location where they took the test down to the lab piece. It was interesting to see them exploring that capability and how it could fit in. The other one that I think has been interesting is even here in Ohio, in Bowling Green, they've been utilizing the Starship fleet. I don't know if you guys have seen these. It almost looks like a little cooler with the 6 wheels. It's an automated shuttle that moves along the sidewalks, both on campus originally before everything kind of broke here. They were using it from the campus dining service to deliver to students on campus, and they've since expanded in a partnership with the city, the city to do some of those deliveries of food. So it's interesting, those type of capabilities and what could come from that. And then also in the UAS side, we have seen 60 Minutes. I don't know if anybody saw it. I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago, talked about some different companies that are exploring utilizing UAS to deliver different things from, as you could guess, some of the medical type things to prescription drugs. We did see too a group called Share, a startup here within Ohio, doing some micromobility stuff, kind of transitioned their model from people movement, as you can guess, has been down greatly, to delivering and partnering with different entities to do prescription deliveries. So it's been interesting to see some of these different capabilities. And again, it's all, and you hear me talk a lot, both connected all the way through different levels of autonomy, and then some of that data utilization and kind of the reliability piece of this. There's a lot of different pieces of it, but it's been interesting to see. I do think there's going to be some active conversations as we come out of this, with mass transit, with different freight movement and goods delivery and possibilities. You could guess that certainly as the industry and some of the startup space and technology providers with major OEMs, we'll be reevaluating, investments in R&D as we go forward. So we'll certainly be following that closely. But by all accounts, it does feel like some of those capabilities and opportunities are certainly being explored.
Yeah, the current situation could actually be a catalyst for a lot of that, advancing a lot of that. Other questions, folks? Open it up again.
Everybody's ready for a long weekend.
Yeah.
I know I am, yes.
Hey, since 33 is right here in our backyard, I just wondered if you could talk in a little bit more detail about how that corridor is progressing.
Yeah.
I know
it's appreciated. I think some folks around that have been great partners on that. It really has been exciting this year with the infrastructure build out. There's been a lot of work that's been going on in the last few years, and you're really now seeing, I don't know if anybody has driven that corridor lately, you can see all the poles going up and all the kind of the next stages of that really starting to come. And so you're kind of starting to see that physical infrastructure, and really on track, I think, to complete the major physical infrastructure build outs this summer, and to be able to get to some of those major next steps of some of the different industry partners to really get out there and actively utilize, as the second half of the year progresses. So excited for those next steps in that, and you can guess the RSU units are going to the poles and the power is being connected, and then to the fiber and the network and the backbone. So all of these really key steps. And for me, it's always been, we got to prove it out. You got to show it. We got to do it. And I think that's how we're going to, it is always meant to be a test corridor to utilize these capabilities with that amount of connectivity and the number of different roadside units along there. I think for me, as part of this effort, is the amount of industry conversations we've had and the possibilities and the interest in that as we do kind of take the next step in that this year and progress forward. So I think that this has been one of those exciting periods with 33 Smart Mobility Corridor, and I think we just, like, I almost refer to it more as just the Smart Mobility, not even necessarily needing to point out 33, because it is the Smart Mobility Corridor and is looked on that perspective from a lot around the country, a lot of eyes on that and the possibilities and the lessons learned from that. And certainly as we progress, another next step is certainly onboard units in the different vehicles and working to get a threshold of number of connected vehicles running through that to help kind of show some of those potential use cases.
Great. Anybody else? All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate you all inviting us on to do this.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Luke, Rich, and Nick, you too. Appreciate your time. Just a couple announcements from the chapter perspective. I wanted to mention that the annual ACEC meeting, the annual meeting is going to be taking place virtually this year. It's June 11th at 10 a.m. and you can find the registration on the ACEC Ohio website. Hopefully it's a little easier for folks from various corners of the state to attend virtually. And then also wanted to mention that this is our last meeting of the 2019-2020 year. As you know, we take the summer off and start back up again in September. We are going to keep the same officers from this year to next year. Normally we rotate every other year, but I guess there's fewer people on the state board and there's somebody, basically they don't want two people from the same company on the board. And so we're kind of stalled for a year until somebody rotates off. We met as a chapter, the chapter leadership, in different scenarios, but ultimately the simplest and cleanest way is to just kind of keep everybody in the same position for another year. We don't know what next year looks like for meetings, so stay tuned. It'll just kind of depend on how the guidelines are for the state and what we're allowed to do. Most likely if we are at the Scioto Country Club, it'll depend on their regulations as well. So we could be doing things virtually for a little while. I think today went really well. If you have any suggestions, please let us know. Feel free to email us. But with that, I bid everybody a great week. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
And thank you for a lot of members who are outside of the Columbus area for joining in.
Yeah, absolutely.
See ya.
Thanks, Ollie.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.